This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. This is our 2016-17 NBA preview of the Pacific Division. 5 teams in that division. Everybody knows who's at the top dog, and ironically enough, everybody knows who was the one that was at the cellar. But there are always something to talk about when you got 5 teams historically that have brought nothing but great basketball excitement. We have a great guest on board with us to help us break this division down. But before we get into all of that, you know I got to roll out my brother from another mother. He writes one of the illest websites, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC. My man, Mr. Warren Shaw, ripping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw, man. Are you ready to get down with this NBA preview?
I am so excited, man. The fact that we have finally drudged through the summer and we're ready here to talk about these division previews. So to all those fans, listeners of the NBA Baseline, especially those who've stuck with us throughout the entire summer, as the content kind of changed, but now we're ready to get back into the nuts and bolts of this thing. With the reason we're all here, NBA season is upon us, training camp is upon us, and we have a great guest to kind of discuss the Pacific Division, bro.
Yeah, definitely, man. Our boy Oliver Maroney from Basketball Insiders, he is going to be on board with us in a few moments to help us talk about these teams that are repping out of the Pacific, who's going to wind up on top with definitely the offseason moves and the drafting that's been done, and who, again, might fall at the bottom. Will it be the Los Angeles Lakers? Can the Sacramento Kings finally put a roster around Boogie Cousins? And how about the Phoenix Suns? What is the game plan out there in the land of the rising sun? So many questions that have to be asked, and hopefully our man Oliver Maroney will help us answer them as we get you guys geared up for this upcoming NBA season for the Pacific Division. Once again, you know how to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee. But we always encourage you to get at the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. We're available on all the major platforms, available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, Player FM, also available on Google Music and the Roku channel. So be sure to download any one of these platforms to allow us to be your go-to resource as we get you ready for this upcoming NBA season. Now, for those that are getting primed up and geared up for this NBA season, you know Fan Essentials has your best heart in mind. With that being said, to get your favorite gear for this upcoming season, you got to go to fanessentials.net. Now, fanessentials.net is more than just a store for the fans. It gets you the right gear you need so that you're ready for this upcoming season. They find the sports gear so you don't have to. Each fan box comes packed with some amazing gear, making a great gift idea for any sports fan. Prices start at $14.99 and $34.99. If you visit fanessentials.net and use the promo code BASELINE at the checkout, you get 30% off of your first month. Once again, you go to fanessentials.net, use the promo code BASELINE at the checkout, and you get 30% off your first month. So be sure to visit fanessentials.net to get all the essentials you need. Now, it's time for us to get right into it. This is our 2016-2017 NBA Pacific Division preview. And with us this week, we have a great guest who's going to help us break down this very intriguing division. And he's been doing a lot of fabulous work. You can catch him on Basketball Insiders. He is the one and only Oliver Maroney. Oliver, thanks for joining us to help us do this preview, man.
Hey, not a problem, guys. Anytime. Looking forward to it.
All right, first things first, Oliver. When you think of this past offseason and you think of the Pacific Division, what's the first thing that jumps out at you more than anything outside of the fact that Kevin Durant now resides in the Bay?
I'd say new coaching overall, just down the list. You've got the Kings, obviously, that got a new coach. You look at the Lakers, they have a new coach. I think that's a telltale sign of what's to come for these two teams, as well as Phoenix Suns, who by the way, are adding Earl Watson in there finally for a full season. So it'll be interesting to see the coaching kind of regime in those 3 teams specifically. But aside from Golden State, I mean, that would be my big point, would really be just the coaching aspect of those 3 teams and, 3 of the 5 teams out of the Pacific Division.
All right, and as you talk about coaching, and the first team that we are going to obviously take a look at is the Los Angeles Lakers, who last season finished at the bottom of the division with only 17 wins. They have their new man in Luke Walton, and one of the things that a lot of people are really looking at is, can you buy into this new nucleus, this post-Kobe era, where D'Angelo Russell, where Randall, where Larry Nance Jr. and Brandon Ingram? Can they now usher in that old excitement that Los Angeles Laker fans basically are going to be clamoring for now that they don't have the Mamba playing in a Lakers jersey?
Definitely. I think they're going to try and run a pace and space style offense with D'Angelo Russell, obviously at the point guard position. I think Russell is a candidate for, even like a most improved player award, even after the terrific kind of ending to last season. Besides his off the court issues, the guy is an absolute stud. I love how he reads the game. His vision is very underrated. That's, for me, I like this nucleus. I like this young core. I'm still confused a little bit on Brandon Ingram. I'm not leaning one way or the other, bust or not kind of situation. It's very early to tell, but I think the Lakers have constructed a team that will fit very well with Luke Walton. And I think, Luke Walton is a very interesting coach. He's a new era type of coach. He understands younger guys and younger generations better than most other coaches probably would in this league. So I think it's a great fit in LA.
It's kind of hard to, when you look at the roster from a season ago and to even what they did last year. I mean, this year, what they've done, turning over that roster. They weren't really good at anything. They were bad offensively, bad defensively. They didn't shoot the ball well. Didn't have great bench scoring. Where do you think is the most improvement that you're going to see from this team? Because they need improvement everywhere. But what's the one thing that you think you can point out and say, okay, they're going to be definitely better in this area?
I think the depth. I mean, honestly, yes, you spent a little bit extra money on Mozgov, Deng. Those are very questionable signings just based on the dollars that you've given them. But this is obviously an accelerated cap. You're going to have to pay players that want to play in a potentially rebuilding kind of situation. So for me, it's depth. They didn't have much of it last season. They had a lot of different injuries and various different situations, along with this ushering Kobe out the door kind of situation. Byron Scott was not a very good head coach in my mind. So really, you've got a lot of different things to look forward to. But I think the biggest thing is depth. And you've got veteran guys like Luol Deng. They've got pedigrees that have gone into the playoffs, that have played well in certain scenarios and situations. So I think for most fans and most Lakers people inside the organization, I think they're most satisfied with the way that they've constructed at least the top 8 guys on their team.
Oliver, one of the things that really stands out to me is this perception that in order for a young basketball team to grow, you need to add a veteran presence. And we've seen teams like the Minnesota Timberwolves, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to be excited to see playing this year in comparison to what we've seen in previous years. But we've also seen how the Los Angeles Lakers go about the business of quote unquote adding the veteran play to the point where it almost seems like the veterans seem to take away from being able to see that maturation and growth from the young guys. So with the additions of Luol Deng and Timothy Mozgov, does this supplement and does this actually help when you know that the realization is these young kids have got to come out and have to play? We need to see these guys on a continually consistent basis. Can Luke Walton make that balance when you add 2 veteran guys who have been, viable presences? They've been a part of main teams. They've been in starting lineups. How do you compensate for that when you know you got a young team like this?
I think there's many ways that you can do it, but I think when they were meeting with these free agents, I guarantee you they were telling them, you may not be the first man off the bench. You may be the second, third, fourth, fifth. I mean, the expectation needs to be set up front. Yes, they're getting paid a lot of money, but part of that money is there to kind of grow these players and help them mature. I mean, you've got the thing about the Lakers specifically is that Ingram, he's incredibly raw. Yes, he's got some ball skills. He's definitely got a jump shot. He's definitely got some things to his game that are very much improved. And you could see him be an all-NBA sort of talent at some point in time. But I think when you look at his game overall, he's very raw in the scheme of things. And I think you need a guy like Luol Deng to help kind of move him along and progress him. And so when Ingram is playing, I expect him to play 25 or 30 minutes a night, and you should expect Luol Deng to come in for the 10 or 15 that's needed. He may play a little bit more. He may play small ball 4. They may try and find other utilizations for him. But the bottom line is all these guys aren't going to stay healthy at any point in time. So I think adding these veterans, if you want to call them veterans, that's fine. But I honestly think that it was more just for depth purposes, as well as kind of maturing these young, raw, and talented players into good NBA kind of role models. I mean, you look at D'Angelo Russell, a guy who also has had his off the court issues. He's got to get his act kind of straight, at least off the court. On the court, you know he's good. You know he's capable of doing a lot of different things, but they need to grow and mature in both aspects. And so, they're totally different sides of the spectrum. I think Ingram has handled himself well so far, but on the court, obviously, he needs to develop. And then on the other side of things, D'Angelo Russell, great player on the court. We know what he can bring, but off the court, he's got to mature and he's got to get better at what he's doing off the court. So for me, it's just helping these guys mature along. He may not have a ton of minutes or a ton of time. A guy like Luol Deng may not play a ton, but the bottom line is this helps the team overall, chemistry-wise. I think with a young coach that is actually technically a rookie coach in the scheme of things, a head coach in Luke Walton, you're going to have struggles, and those veteran guys are going to be the guys that you're going to rely on to kind of help lead this team along.
So I like what you said there, and I want to get back to the front court situation, but I want to touch on a little bit what you're saying with D'Angelo Russell. So Jose Calderon is on this roster as well too, and he's one of those guys Knicks fans used to love to hate on. But as from a veteran standpoint, how much impact can he have on a guy like Russell and teaching him the position, but more importantly, teaching him how to conduct himself off the court? And before you even answer that, what do you see Lou Williams as? I mean, because he's obviously a great scorer and all that, but he doesn't seem to take in that leadership role off the court, if you will. Is that something he can maybe step up with this Laker organization going forward?
I think go to your first point here as far as Jose Calderon goes. I think Jose Calderon is an NBA, he's one of those guys that's gone from team to team to team, and nobody's really grasped onto him. I mean, obviously he's had stints in just a multitude of different teams, but I think when you talk about a guy like that who's been around the league, been with all sorts of players, all sorts of personalities, all sorts of people, he can talk to those experiences better than anyone else can. And hopefully Russell has the ears to kind of take that in. I mean, really, when you're a young player like this, you should be a sponge. You should be soaking up every little bit of information that you can to try and understand and develop and grow. If you're a guy like Karl Anthony Towns, you are doing that. He's already doing that all, and you see it. And that's why people love him. But when you look at D'Angelo Russell, there's been question marks about it. Can he decide to make these good decisions? Can he push this off the court kind of stuff aside and become that player? And I think we've seen a little bit of it Summer League. Obviously, he definitely developed and you could see it on the court. But I think a guy like Jose Calderon just helps that situation out just that much more. As far as the Lou Williams situation, I mean, Lou Williams, he's kind of in and out of this rotation. I don't know where he fits in with this team. It's hard to kind of see a role for him at this point. Obviously, kind of a 6th, 7th, 8th man kind of role. I would assume he'd be kind of one of the first off the bench to be considered. And I think a lot of it depends on how Jordan Clarkson plays, because if Jordan Clarkson comes out and he's inconsistent, like he has been at times, throughout last season, then you may see Lou Williams inserted into the lineup a little bit more. And, he's more of a consistent player. Kind of what you're going to get with a guy like that. I don't know if he's the outspoken leader that you're looking for on this team. I think if there's anybody, I think Luol Deng seems to be that guy. He's got that pedigree. He's got the playoff experience. He's got all the different attributes for me that say, yes, good player on the court, great role model off the court. That's kind of the guy that you want to lean on if you're going to lean on a player. Jose Calderon, another guy that I think would be a good option as well.
Oliver Maroney joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast as we preview the Pacific Division for the 2016-2017 NBA season. As we're discussing the Los Angeles Lakers, a team who struggled over the last couple of years, not amassing 20 wins last season. And Oliver, look, let's call it for what it is. Kobe Bryant averaged 17.6 points in his final season as a Los Angeles Laker, and not too far behind, you had two players for the Lakers averaging around 15, and then Russell at 13. Who in your mind looks to gain the most from Kobe Bryant's departure? Who is ready to make that offensive leap on this team to supplement what they're going to lose out with Kobe Bryant not on the roster?
Well, I look at two guys. I mean, Jordan Clarkson obviously is going to get an extended amount of time now playing. I don't think his role is as jeopardized when you had Kobe there, kind of just ushering him out like the Lakers did. But I think the guy that is going to be most crucial and most important and is going to make the leaps and bounds that you're expecting him to make would be D'Angelo Russell. I love this kid. Like I said, off the court issues, yes, he's got question marks. Yes, there is some concerns there, but on the court, this kid is a lot better than people give him credit for. He makes a lot of good plays that people don't see. I think he can be a perennial all-star, a top 5 point guard if he gets his head straight and if he puts effort in and really works hard on both defense and offense. Both sides of the floor, he needs to do a better job of just being efficient and making sure he's utilizing every single play to his advantage. But I think that this guy is going to be the playmaker, the creator going forward. And I think Luke Walton has the tools in his toolkit, knowing Steph, knowing Clay, being able to give him the green light and just say, play your butt off and let's see what we can do. I think that is really going to be the crucial stepping stone for this Lakers team, is if he can develop a little bit more. I think he's a 20-10 type of player. I think you look at him incredibly differently if he can continue to grow and improve and develop.
High praise for D'Angelo Russell here from our man, Oliver Maroney, man. So I want to get back to that front court situation, though, too. Looking for another guy or two guys are looking to develop. Where do you stand when it comes to Julius Randle and Larry Nance? There are some people who really think Nance is a better fit for them. Some people don't like Randle's, like a slower paced game, if you will. Although he's a guy who can rebound and take it down, to take down the length of the court. Some people aren't really sold on his ability to develop. Where are you on that, on those two guys, and who you think should be the starting power forward?
Randle's been a question mark since he came into the league, really. I mean, his overall game and skill set is something that can be utilized with the Lakers. It's just a matter of putting it all together. And I think obviously ending his rookie season so soon and getting that injury definitely didn't help his development in game. I actually really like Larry Nance Jr. with this system and this kind of offense. If they're going to run with kind of a pace and space sort of play, he's just far more athletic than what Julius Randle can give you. And if you need a guy who's going to hustle and get rebounds and, get the block shots and stay in the paint and, just play that big man role, I mean, really the workhorse on your team, I think that that's a better option, specifically because I think Randle would match up better with backups than he would with a starting role like that. I think you may see a 4-5 where Nance and Randle are there together, but I just don't know at this point. I'd probably, like I said, I'd say Larry Nance Jr. is a better fit for this team, but I don't think Randle is just, lost in this lineup at all. I think he's got a very good role with this team. He could be a guy off the bench that you can rely on for, 10-10 or something like that, a good double-double kind of figure. It's just he's a little bit slower. He's not as polished offensively, I don't think. He's got some good game from back to the basket kind of motions and movements, but I just don't think he's there yet.
Oliver Maroney joining us here. So, Oliver, look, the Lakers 17 wins last season. Will there be an improvement with Luke Walton as the head coach and this flux of, talent with sprinkled in with a few veteran pieces? Can the Lakers be better than 17 wins?
Yeah, I think they're definitely better than 17 wins this season. I think they're probably around the 25 to 27 win mark. That's just my estimation. Like I said, these are all guesses. We don't know what's going to happen injury-wise and where they end up. But I think they're going to struggle to start the season. I don't expect them to make any sort of huge splash or anything like that for the first 20 to 30 games. Luke Walton has to get his bearings on this team and how he wants them to play and how he wants them to fit into this system. And guys need to know their roles. So I don't think they're going to be expected to do anything in the first 30 to 35 games. But I do think the latter half of the season, when you see teams kind of tail off, they start benching guys. It's a little bit easier for teams that are kind of at the bottom to be able to kind of knock off a couple wins and really start to build some momentum. So I think that you can expect them to win, 15 or 20 to begin the season. And then the last, 15 or 20 games, I definitely expect to see an improvement.
All right, Los Angeles Lakers dead last in points per game, dead last in assists per game, and in the bottom third in points allowed. Something's going to have to give with the new head coach, Luke Walton. Definitely has his work cut out for him as the Los Angeles Lakers enter into this upcoming season, with very little expectations, but a lot of high hopes. Let's go ahead and transition to the team that finished fourth worst in the division, and that being the Phoenix Suns. In 2013, Ryan McDonough was, touted as the general manager to help usher in this new breed, this new wave of Phoenix Suns play. And I guess next to the mystery that is the land of the rising sun, the mystery still remains about this basketball team. And when you look at this Phoenix Suns basketball team given last season, it seems like the same added old question: what are the Phoenix Suns doing? And now without Jeff Hornacek as the head coach, the controversy, and now having Earl Watson being the supplanted head coach and a little bit of stability there, there's still that big question mark about the Suns still have too many point guards to choose from. And now with the emergence of Devin Booker, who looks to be like another phenom out of that bench, Oliver, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about the Phoenix Suns is, if you're Earl Watson, what do you do with all of this backcourt talent that you have? You don't have enough minutes to throw out what could be the smallest lineup in the NBA.
Yeah, I think you've got to look to shop Bledsoe or Knight, one of the two. You just got to figure it out, decide which one you'll go with. Whoever has the highest offer, just take the bidder and go. I think that's the best solution for you, because you've got so many different guys that you can utilize. Devin Booker, for me, he's my favorite talent in the NBA. I love watching the guy. I think that he's going to be a very special player. Similar to D'Angelo Russell, I have high hopes for him. But, speaking with ex-player development coach for the Phoenix Suns, Irving Rowland, he took a likeness to this guy more than a lot of other guys that he had ever seen. I mean, he was talking about him very highly. Guy's extremely mature for a 19-year-old. He's got a jumper. He's very efficient. He polished offensively, just understands the game, lives, breathes, dies it. I mean, every single day. He sounds to me like the type of guy that could become a perennial all-star, a guy that you're going to want on your team. So I think you have to build around Devin Booker. The other two guys, Brandon Knight and Bledsoe, yes, they've been a great backcourt. There's been some confusion as far as who's who and what's what and where they're going to play and how many minutes they're going to play. Obviously, injury prone to both of them. I think you've got to look to shop one of those two guys. It's just a matter of, who's out there, who wants them. And then once you get an offer, I think you take it. I think draft picks, I don't think you need even players at this point. You've got a ton of young talent there. I think they're they had one of the most underrated off seasons from any team in the NBA this past off season.
I like your comments there, and shout out to Irv. He's a good friend of mine as well, too, so I'm glad you mentioned him. But Devin Booker, ironically, when we did a redraft of just last year's draft, I picked Booker to probably have been, if they were looking at it again, Booker would have been like the third pick, in this year's draft. I mean, last year's draft, rather, because he really is a talent. But when you talk about there's a logjam at the backcourt, there's a logjam in the front court as well, too. So now you have a situation where, similar to the Lakers, you have some veterans who need to help some of these young guys develop. But how much playing time do they get? PJ Tucker's an incumbent guy. He's been there for a little while. They added Jared Dudley back, who's definitely one of the league favorite players out there in terms of just understanding his role and knowing what he needs to do. But TJ Warren has to get some minutes. Does Dragan Bender have to get some minutes? Marquise Chris has to get minutes. Alex Len, even at the center position, needs to get minutes behind Tyson Chandler. How do you see Watson meshing and figuring all that out? Like, if you can go from that, who do you think are the top guys out of that rotation?
Well, I like Chris and I like Bender. Both of them are extremely raw, though. We go back to the same kind of thing. I mean, they picked the upside. They went on, all or nothing basically in this draft. And I like the idea. I like the approach. They had draft picks that are in the middling first round, late lottery pick kind of picks, and they had to go for broke. They had to get the guys that they felt could be the best out of the bunch. And I think they took the best available. And Chris and Bender are both extremely raw. They're both extremely young. They have an extremely high upside. I just don't know if they get many minutes this season. I think you're probably looking at a situation where potentially the veterans like Len, obviously Warren, Tucker, those guys probably will get minutes ahead of a guy like Chris, ahead of a guy like Bender, and they will be worked into the rotation throughout the season. I think as the season progresses, depending on where they are, wins-wise, losses-wise, I think you start to see them pack it in and start to play these guys a lot more. It's a situation where they could go from, 15 minutes a game to 25 or 30 minutes a game towards the end of the season. I think he's just got to look at it as a progression, and they've got to grow. They've got to show some maturity. They've got to show that they are capable of playing in the NBA at the highest level. And I think that that is the starting point for these guys. And then from there, next year you look to build off of it. I mean, a lot of these guys can be traded. They're not high contracted players. I mean, really, they didn't go out and sign too many marquee free agents. I mean, you mentioned Jared Dudley, but he's on a very, very team-friendly contract. A lot of these pieces are tradable. And maybe you look to try and pair these guys up with a Bledsoe or Knight and make it a little more convincing to a team that's maybe contending or close to contending.
All right. So, Oliver, when you look at this basketball team, they finished 22nd in points per game, 28th in points allowed, and very similar to the Los Angeles Lakers. Wherever this growth process, there has to be a starting point is I guess where I'm looking at this. Where do you see this team, when you look at how this roster is constructed, where do you see this team best improving? Are they going to be a better team offensively from the get-go, or can you see this roster kind of gelling to be a much more sound defensively disciplined basketball team? That was part of the reason why they brought Tyson Chandler, to the Phoenix Suns, and clearly he's not the basketball player that he used to be back in 2011 with the Dallas Mavericks. So my expectations is that they've scrapped that experiment. So what do you do with this roster if you're Earl Watson? What do you think the focus should be to give them the best opportunity to maximizing their potential to possibly win basketball games?
I think when you have a young team that's developing and you're trying to get them better, you have to focus on offense first. I know that there's almost the backwards way of what most people say, defense wins championships, all the rest of that. But bottom line is players nowadays are more in tune and feel more inclusive when they're involved on offense. If they're involved on offense, then the defense will come. But I think that you have to, especially with the offensive talent that you have, utilize it to the best of your ability, play as fast-paced as possible. You've got guys to do it, and then you can work on the defense after that. But I think partly just based on the talent and the skill level and the youth that they have, you have to basically use what you have and make it the best possible scenario. And I think the best possible scenario is you score 120 points a night and maybe you don't play much defense to start out the season, but at least the guys are involved and they feel included. Because once guys start checking out, you've seen it with guys like James Harden. I mean, yes, he's notorious for not playing defense or taking plays off, but bottom line is he doesn't feel inclusive, and players around him don't feel inclusive because the offense is stagnant or it's not moving as quickly as you possibly could. When people buy in on offense, they will typically buy in on defense, and I think that helps the defense out because teams are so tired when you're beating them offensively so much that once they're on the offense and you're defensive, basically, they're tired. So I think it helps out on both ends of the court, but I think it starts with offense with this team.
When you say talking about starting with offense, this is a team with 2 point guards on their roster. Both those guys were hurt at various points of the season. Devin Booker ended up doing a lot of the playmaking. This team finished 24th in assists per game last year. Is there any way that they can improve on that specific stat?
Oh, yeah.
Can get some, I guess Booker will handle the ball more often because he didn't really play a lot at the beginning of the season. But, where do you see that? Where do you see that kind of improve for the Phoenix Suns in general?
Well, I think you've got Bledsoe and Knight were regarded as a top 5 backcourt just about a season and a half ago, before they got injured and started struggling. I think they are still, up there in the upper echelon of backcourts. I think they can definitely produce the points. I mean, I think they were sharing about 50 points a night between the two of them at one point in time, about a season and a half ago, like I said. So I think that you've got enough there to be able to be efficient, be able to score offensively and make things happen. But it starts out with knowing their role and knowing what you're going to do. I mean, really, you've got to include Devin Booker in this conversation now. So where do Bledsoe and Knight fit in? Like I said, I think they just have to get rid of one of those two players or else, there's going to be a mess there. I mean, it's a backlog of talent, and I don't think Knight and Bledsoe are going to give you what Booker's going to give you. So I think that's the first and starting point. And then you have to figure out basically who you want. Is it Bledsoe or is it Knight? I personally think Bledsoe's a better player. I think he's developed more. I think he's more polished offensively. That's just my opinion. But overall, you've got to figure out who fits best with Booker. And then once you figure that out, man, I think that Booker and either Bledsoe or Knight can mesh pretty well together with this Phoenix Suns team. And that's where you start to get the assists. That's where you start to get, just more offensive firepower and threat. I mean, really, you've seen it with teams that have one offensive threat. it's very easy to defend. You know who's going to get the ball every time you go down the court. If you have 2 or 3 or 4 weapons offensively, it's very, very difficult to defend. And that's why I think, you saw last season where Devin Booker was the only focal point on offense. That's why it was a little bit of a struggle to begin with, is because you look at him being the only weapon offensively, really, and he was the guy who kind of carried that team and put him on the back for the last latter part of the season. So for me, it's decide who you want to start, Bledsoe or Knight, and then go from there.
So before we move on from the Phoenix Suns, final one here, who do you think is the biggest X factor for this team? From a bench standpoint, you're looking at guys like TJ Warren, Bender, Alex Len, which one of those guys you think is going to be the biggest X factor for Phoenix next season? TJ
Warren. I love TJ Warren. I don't know if he starts or not, and that's yet to be determined. But if he's coming off the bench, he's a very, very efficient player. He was one of the best college basketball players I've seen in the past 5 to 10 years. I think he's a very, very good player offensively, like I said. And defensively, he's not as bad as people make him out to be. I think he's strong. He's got some width and length to him to where he can kind of reach into balls. But I think that he is definitely the key to this Phoenix Suns kind of rotation and bench role.
The Phoenix Suns averaging 33 wins a season since 2012. I know the Phoenix Suns fans are expecting a lot more, and hopefully now with Earl Watson as the head coach and with this young nucleus of fresh talent and hopefully a healthy Eric Bledsoe and Brandon Knight, there probably will be a lot more to look forward to in the land of the rising sun. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA with our special guest, Oliver Maroney from Basketball Insiders. Be sure to check him out on Twitter at @OMaroneyNBA as we move forward to talk about the team that finished third in the Pacific Division, and that would be the Sacramento Kings. Let's not make any bones about it. The Sacramento Kings could have been considered as the circus of the NBA, with so much troubling drama that surrounded that team and the organization. Probably in many people's opinion that the Kings would be considered a laughing stock, but there's no laughing matter when you have Boogie Cousins on your roster, arguably the best player at the center position. Just what do you make of the rest of the roster? And now with this particular offseason, losing Rajon Rondo, where will the focus and the attention be? They added Aaron Aflalo, they added Matt Barnes. So the circus that continues to be the Sacramento Kings, and what roster do you put around Boogie Cousins, again, remains a question mark. And with the new head coach, Dave Yeager there, Oliver, I think the biggest question is, how much longer do we continue to see this quote-unquote charade of what do you do with this roster around DeMarcus Cousins before you really have to entertain the idea, should DeMarcus Cousins still be a Sacramento King?
I think they've got one more season left in him before Cousins kind of loses his mind. I don't blame Cousins for, yes, he's immature. Yes, he's got problems on the court and off the court as far as just speaking out about things, and he's got frustration, but I think some of it is warranted. So it's partly obviously the Kings and partly him. But I think, it's very, very difficult in the NBA when you aren't winning very many games and you don't have much help around you. You just see him become frustrated. And like I said, I just don't blame him. So for me, I think the biggest thing is he's got one season left with Dave Yeager, new head coach. He's known to be a player's coach. I think he's got one season to kind of prove it. And if they can just make marketable improvements as far as offense and defense goes, as well as just show a willingness to want to win around Cousins, I think that would be enough to keep Cousins there for a longer period of time.
So many things to discuss about the Sacramento organization. We could spend a whole show on them, but where do you stand? A lot of the rumors over the summer with Rudy Gay, is he somebody that has to be moved by the start of training camp or sometime before the season ends?
No, I don't think so. I think if you're Sacramento, you wait for the right offer to come in. They're actually, the ball's in their court. No pun intended. But it definitely, you don't need to do anything. You just wait for some team to call. This is what happens. Right now, I guarantee you he doesn't get traded. As it gets closer to the deadline, there's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 teams that are going to look to improve their roster marketably to try and get into a playoff position or try and stay in a playoff position. You talk about teams like the Hawks, you can go down the list of different teams that could be or, should be in the playoffs, but you can go down, 4 through 8, I think, in either conference. you can look at teams that are going to be interested in a guy like Rudy Gay, a 3-and-D type of player, if you want to call him that. I think that they're going to get more calls, and they're going to be the guys that are going to make the decision. But I think that you hold off until you get the best offer possible for him, and then you ship him off. But they don't have to move him.
If you're the Sacramento Kings and you look at this roster, I think now the expectation is can Willie Cauley-Stein, their pick last season, take that next step? I mean, clearly he's going to see some extended minutes with the shuffling of this rotation. And if he's playing that power forward position, I mean, he's basically going to have to deal with the likes of guys like Draymond Green, Blake Griffin, who are not only great defensive players, but they're also great offensive players. If you're either one of those guys, you obviously are not going to rely on Willie Cauley-Stein, blowing you off the court and showing you versatility from an offensive standpoint. How big of a step do you think Willie Cauley-Stein can now make with this kind of revamped lineup and being under the helm of Dave Joerger?
I think Dave Joerger has shown incredible ways of getting the best out of his front courts. I mean, you look at it in Memphis. He had Zach Randolph on the tail end of his career, or what people called the tail end of his career, when he took over for Hollins and literally reinvigorated his career. I mean, Zach Randolph was a very big piece in their playoff pushes and playoff runs. Marc Gasol did excellently. Obviously, these guys are way better than what Cauley-Stein is now. But I think Cauley-Stein, under a guy like Dave Joerger, can at least improve, know his role a little bit better. I think last year is just, really, it's so hard if you're an NBA player and you don't know what role you're supposed to play. And I think that's a lot of the reason why you see teams like Sacramento struggle for so long, is when guys don't know their role, they get frustrated, they get upset, confidence goes down. There's a lot of added attributes to what that is. And so Dave Joerger, he's definitely a guy that'll tell it to you. He's a player's coach. He understands what players want. And I think that that's going to be very, very good for Cauley-Stein's improvement this year.
A lot of Sacramento's improvements last year offensively came because of Rondo. Although he's a statistical whore, if you will, because he's always just worrying about his own numbers, if you will. But they were decent offensively. Joerger's known as more of a defensive-minded coach. Do you see the offense taking a step back, especially with guys like Ty Lawson, Collison kind of running the show?
Yeah, I think Rondo is a little bit underrated in his playmaking ability. Yeah, he definitely takes up a lot of the stats. He definitely is not a very good shooter from the outside, and offensively has his struggles. But I think that, you may see the offense take a step back. I think Cousins is going to have he's going to have an increased role if he didn't already have it. But I think that, you look at a guy like Ty Lawson. I did a piece on him actually recently, just of how he could reinvigorate his career in Sacramento, given the opportunity. And I think that he was a very, very good regarded as one of the best point guards in the league about 3 seasons ago. So it's not that far-fetched to think that he could have a better year this season, and it just really depends on where his head's at and what he's doing off the court. So if Ty Lawson comes back, bounces back, and has a career year kind of situation, I think that you see Sacramento stay very similar offensively, and maybe they get a little bit better defensively, to where they may win a couple more games and get some more more stability, I guess, just in that Kings organization overall.
Oliver Maroney joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to check him out on Basketball Insiders. Basketball Insiders gives you everything you need to know, the rumors, the trades, great article pieces. So be sure to go to basketballinsiders.com or check out the Twitter at @BBallInsiders for the latest writings from Oliver Maroney, as we are discussing the 2016-2017 NBA Pacific Division preview. And as we continue on discussing the Sacramento Kings, Oliver, one of the things that I think is intriguing is the offseason acquisition for Aaron Aflalo, because 2 things really stand out to me. And one thing is that a lot of people are not talking about the drafting that the Sacramento Kings did in getting Sky Labrissere from Kentucky and also getting Malachi Richardson from Syracuse. But the fact that Aaron Aflalo now is signed and the expectations is he's likely to be the starting shooting guard, where does that leave Ben McLemore? I mean, this was a guy that a lot of people talked about, that the high end, man, the guy is explosive and is expected to shoot the rock like Ray Allen. He is not fitting comfortably with the Sacramento Kings since being drafted. And now with drafting a guy like Malachi Richardson, who had a showing out party playing in the NCAA tournament with Syracuse, and Aaron Aflalo, who is is still, even though he is not clearly the guy that played in Denver and back in Detroit, is still a much more reliable shooting guard. Where does Ben McLemore fit in this grand scheme of things?
I think he's on the outside looking in, and I just don't know where he fits. I think that he's struggled both offensively and defensively. But this also is attributed to what the Kings have done to him. I mean, really, the coaching changes just don't help players like this, especially in a developing kind of role. Youth, when you're not mature enough to really understand that the NBA is a business and not necessarily just a game of basketball anymore. A lot of the times players, you see them develop either a lack of confidence or just a lack of belief in themselves. And I think you've seen that over time with Ben McLemore. He's going to have to really prove himself this season. If there's any kind of great approach to what he's going to have to do or what they're going to have to do to get him to play more and get him to get back to where he was, as an offensive threat, I think that Dave Joerger is going to be kind of the be-all, end-all for this kid. If he can improve and Dave Joerger can kind of get to him, and I mean mentally and just physically overall. I think physically he's got the tools. He's 6'5". He's got a lot of length and a lot of size. He's got everything that you want in an NBA player. But like I said, the lack of confidence, the amount of times that he's been burned, I guess you could call it, just based on the amount of coaches that have come through Sacramento in the past 3 seasons. I just think this kid hasn't really been given a full opportunity or a full shot, and he's got to, roll with the punches at this point. So if Dave Joerger is going to give a guy a chance, I think McLemore may be that guy. And in order to do that, you've got to let him play through mistakes. You've got to let him, lose and win games for you at the same time, if that makes any sense. So I think that's going to be the saving grace, is if Dave Joerger 20, 30, 40 games into the season realizes that they're not going to make the playoffs, I think McLemore gets extended playing time and an opportunity to prove himself.
The Sacramento Kings finished with 33 wins last season. Oliver, real quick, do you think that this team takes a step forward or do they take a step back from this previous season?
It's tough to say. I think they're very, very similar to what they were last season as far as wins, losses goes. I think they take a step forward on the court and off the court mentally to a point where next season they could be a playoff contender.
All right. Well, there you have it. The Sacramento Kings trying to move forward, and hopefully with the mind of Dave Joerger and hopefully a clamoring Sacramento King fan base, this will all come to fruition at the beginning of this season. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our 2016-2017 Pacific Division preview with our special guest, Oliver Maroney from Basketball Insiders. And let's talk about the last 2 teams that make up this division, talking about the team that came in second place first, and that being the Los Angeles Clippers. And what more can be said? Doc Rivers has done wonders to turn this basketball franchise into a viable playoff contending team over the last 3 seasons. And there's no question that when Doc Rivers has his hand on the players will come and play for him. But the biggest question still now remains, is it enough when you've got the type of talent that the Clippers have had over the last few seasons? Yes, health has been an issue, but Doc Rivers is the basketball president of operations, and he's responsible for putting together the roster that he has. And somehow, some way, a team like the Golden State Warriors has leapfrogged in a division where the expectations were that the Los Angeles Clippers should be the number 1 team in the Pacific. Last season, this team, despite injuries, finished with 53 wins. And Oliver, once you look at this basketball team that's constructed, a lot was being said. Can Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, as that trifecta, be good enough to be the best out of the Pacific Division? Do you still buy into that when all of the speculations was saying that this group should really split when the opportunity presented itself?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I mean, I think I don't think they're going to win the Pacific Division just based on Golden State's roster. I think that's kind of, I just don't know who's going to beat the Golden State Warriors. But I will say, and I was asked this yesterday, actually, if there was one team, not a favorite, that you would pick to make the NBA Finals, who would you pick? And I said the LA Clippers. And I think the LA Clippers have a shot to beat the Golden State Warriors. They've really got, they've, over the past couple of seasons, have had the best results against a team like the Warriors. So for me personally, I think that they this is a make it or break it season in my mind. Doc Rivers has been given a ton of time with this team. And yes, he's definitely achieved what they thought he would achieve and maybe even more based on the wins and losses. But as far as playoff success goes, the Clippers and the Clippers organization are definitely chiming for more of it. And the only way you do that is to get to the conference finals at very minimum. And I think that, like I said, if they don't get to the conference finals this season, I don't know if Doc Rivers still has a job. That's just my personal opinion on the whole subject, just based on the fact that he's had very much enough time to improve this roster and get it to where it could be built into a team that's extremely successful. They're a top 3 or top 4 team in the Western Conference almost every year, and not getting to the Western Conference finals is a little bit of a failure in my mind. So for me, it's a make it or break it season. Doc Rivers has to showcase what he can do coaching wise, as well as the big three, or however you want to call it, Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, and DeAndre Jordan need to step up massively in order to get a second, a third, or a fourth seed in the West and push for a conference finals this season.
Yeah, this is definitely a team that I think we've been pegging, looking for them to finally take that next step. A couple teams out there in the NBA, Memphis, even though, all Atlanta teams, like kind of the same thing over and over and over again. And when is enough? But as CL alluded to, Doc is responsible for creating the roster for the most part.
Yep.
Do you think he's done a decent enough job with this year's, I guess, rendition or addition for the bench? Because one of these guys is going to get injured. It seems to be one of those things. Do they have enough to kind of sustain that and hopefully make a run when playoff comes playoff time?
Yeah, I think they do. I think they'll always have a shot with 2 of the 3 guys. It's just, when you don't have 2 of those guys, it's really, really difficult to win, specifically because they kind of feed off each other pretty well. I mean, Chris Paul is one of the best playmakers in the league and has been for a very, very long time. I think losing him at any point in the season is a very, very big detriment to this team, just based on the fact that the backup point guard position is not Chris Paul. When you have a guy like that, you just can't. He's irreplaceable. He's somebody who definitely makes every single teammate and player better. So I think that you've got to look at Chris Paul being the focal point of this offense and the focal point of this team moving forward. Now, if Blake Griffin gets injured or has his struggles, I think that's okay. You don't necessarily need Blake Griffin to be Blake Griffin of a year and a half, 2 years ago, scoring 25 or whatever he was doing and getting, double doubles every night. But DeAndre Jordan, I think, is going to take a huge step forward this season. I think his gold medal in, the Olympics, I think bonding with that team, growing with that team, he was one of the best players on that Olympic roster for a while, specifically when it came down to, the quarterfinals, semis, et cetera, of the Olympics. And so I think that he's going to take a massive step forward. I think he's got a lot more mature. I think he knows what is expected of him, as well as I think that he can take it to another level. He's still young. He's still very much encouraging as far as physically. And I think that he can take another step and make this Clippers team just that much better.
Oliver Maroney joining us here as we're discussing the Los Angeles Clippers in our 2016-2017 NBA Pacific Division preview. So, Oliver, fill in this blank. If we expect the Los Angeles Clippers to win the Pacific Division, what blank would have to happen for this team? Like, I guess, in other words, who steps up and is that person really has the highest level to be able to take this team over the top? For the last few years, we've said maybe it's Chris Paul. And to your point now, you're talking about the vast improvement of DeAndre Jordan and the experience of him going out and winning a gold medal for the United States basketball, for the U.S. men's basketball team. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, who helps him get over the top that we're talking about in this division will run toe-to-toe with the Golden State Warriors?
Well, I think if you want to fill in the blank and make a funny remark about it, I'd say probably an injury to like Kevin Durant or Steph Curry. But if we wanted to talk about the Clippers specifically, I think it is DeAndre Jordan. Bottom line is, Chris Paul has probably, he's almost at the point where he's probably at his peak, if not, trending downwards, I guess you could call it, based on age, durability, et cetera. He's got a lot of miles on his legs, played a long time. Yes, he's still going to be the playmaker. Yes, he's still going to be an incredibly good point guard. Don't get me wrong there. He's a great playmaker, great person, great player, but DeAndre Jordan is in the prime of his career, and he's physically probably the best center in the league. I mean, if you want to put it that way, he's defensively one of the best centers, and I think that he has an opportunity to be even better. Like I said, the gold medal winning in Rio, going down with that team, understanding the chemistry and the roles, and being at that sort of level changed his mindset, I believe. And I think that he's going to take the extra step that's needed for this Clippers team to kind of succeed and get to the conference finals. Potentially, if you want to throw in there winning the Pacific Division, I like I said, I don't know if I see a team that's going to beat Golden State out wins-wise, even with losing the depth that they lost.
Final question on the Clippers here, Oliver. So I was a little surprised that they brought back Austin Rivers. I thought he was going to have a bigger market, but he does stay home, if you will, stays with his pops out there as a head coach. Jamal Crawford was another guy who was potentially rumored to potentially moving on. Which one of those two guys do you think is going to be most important to the bench success? Obviously Crawford, you could pretty much name the Sixth Man of the Year award after him, but he's the same thing. He's got to be trending downward a little bit. Do you think Rivers can kind of now step up and maybe equate to some of what Crawford does offensively and defensively on that side of the basketball?
Yeah, I think Rivers is kind of a blue chip player. Yes, he's offensively, he's pretty inconsistent. He gets hot and he's very streaky, very similar to Jamal Crawford in some senses. But I think defensively, you saw a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. I like the effort that he puts in on both ends of the court. He plays with just a ton of heart and passion, and I think that kind of drives this team forward when needed. So I do think Austin Rivers needs to take the step forward. I think that's the guy, if you're going to choose one of the role players off the bench to make a difference, I think Austin Rivers is going to be that guy.
Oliver Maroney joining us here, the Los Angeles Clippers, a team that basically was a middle-of-the-pack team, offensively and defensively. If healthy, they could be one of those top three teams possibly in the Western Conference. When not healthy, who knows where they might fall into play. But as we've been saying before, all eyes now are on Doc Rivers as he tries to get these guys to do it one more time, and hopefully this will yield possible postseason success, as much as they will probably not be the best team in the Pacific Division, because last year the best team in the Pacific Division was practically the best team in the NBA up until Game 7 of the NBA Finals, in which the King decided to reclaim his throne. And then the Golden State Warriors chose to do something that no one was expecting to be done, which is land the biggest free agent of them all in Kevin Durant this offseason. And now the question isn't whether or not the Golden State Warriors would win the Pacific Division, but ultimately, how many wins can they get to on an NBA schedule? Is 82 games enough for the amount of wins for this roster that's been constructed? When you look at this team, Oliver, I mean, there's no question. Talent up and down from the point guard to the center position, well, maybe with the exception of the center position, but the versatility of that might even be an afterthought when you look at how these guys play under Steve Kerr. This is a team, 73 wins removed in the regular season. Undoubtedly, it only needed 54 to win that division. Is 73 going to be considered a disappointment when you look at how this roster is constructed?
I don't think so. I think people understand that it's going to be difficult to kind of mesh all these egos and put them together. I kind of peg them in like the 66 to 68 win mark, give or take this season. They may even do less than that, based on whether they really want to win that many games. I mean, if 58 is enough to win the division, then why go over 60 really? Unless the Cleveland Cavaliers are there pretty close to you, there's really no other reason, unless you're, like I said, fearing home court or something like that. But I could realistically see them win 66 to 68 games with the roster they have constructed, if they get used to each other quick enough and kind of understand each other's roles.
I love what they did at the center position, replacing Bogut, getting a guy like Zaza. I think he's just one of those underrated, hard-nosed guys. We had John Hammond on our show last summer, from the Milwaukee Bucks, and he said losing Zaza was one of the hardest things he had to do, for his team and roster. And I think Pachulia played great, in his time as a Maverick, as kind of the consolation prize to Mark Cuban and Dallas Mavericks at that center position too, after losing out on the aforementioned DeAndre Jordan. But when you look at this roster and you're trying to find the weaknesses, you're trying to pick them apart here, depth seems to be the thing that all right, maybe they don't have enough of that. Do you agree with that assessment, or where do you see them kind of faltering, if you will, outside of that starting lineup?
I actually don't see it as depth. I see more of an issue with Draymond Green than I do anything else. And the only reason I say that is Draymond Green was excellent last year, kind of their saving grace, right? He did a lot of things that nobody else wanted to do on that team. He does just so much versatility. He has so much versatility. He does so much for that team on both ends of the floor. Very underrated defensively. Actually, very efficient offensively. He has a lot of things to bring to that game, but I think the off-court issues that he had last season, along with his kind of playoff finals kind of conundrum, whatever you want to call it, all that stuff kind of built up, and he looked pretty awful in the Olympics. He didn't look the same Draymond Green that I've seen with Golden State. And yes, granted, he's playing with far superior players overall down the list. But I'm worried about Draymond Green. I mean, if he's not involved as much or in the right mindset or playing like he did in the Olympics, I think this team could really be a different team.
Oliver, it's interesting that you bring that up, because what you're using in sort of the word is conundrum with Draymond Green, I felt was more infectious about the attitude that the Golden State Warriors displayed in the NBA Finals after they came back from that 3-1 deficit to the Oklahoma City Thunder. I thought that arrogance it was more the appropriate word, and which really reared its ugly head when it mattered the most, that making sound decisions and mentally being in the moment properly. And it wasn't, to me, just Draymond Green. I think Steph Curry showed signs of it. Klay Thompson showed signs of it. And unfortunately, when they did lose Andrew Bogut, who was I guess in their minds, part of that defensive anchor, so to speak, the one thing that made the Golden State Warriors, who we talk about over the last 2 seasons, is the one thing that I thought was going to be their Achilles heel if they didn't step up and improve that, which is their defense. Now, they are still a sound team defensively, a top 20 team this past season during the regular season, but I think it was a far stretch from what they showed when they won the championship 2 years ago. So ultimately, what does this come down to now that you have Kevin Durant on this roster? Because Kevin Durant is a good player. He's definitely improved defensively, but can we collectively say that they're going to be a better team defensively like they have been over the last 2 years with the addition of him on this roster?
Depends on Draymond Green in my mind. Like I said, I think it all hinges basically on him. I'm not worried about Kevin Durant. I think Kevin Durant is a very, very good defender, one of the best two-way players in the league. And then you've got Steph Curry, obviously. He's got his problems defensively as well, but I think that he's pretty sound overall. And then Klay Thompson, obviously, we know he's a very good defender. So I'm not worried about this team defensively. I am worried about Draymond Green and just kind of where his head's at. Like I said, I just all the different things and signs show that he's, it doesn't look good. I'm not saying that, during the season he won't play amazing or won't be just perfectly fine. But, all those kind of alarming little things that popped up throughout this offseason, as well as even just the tail end of last year, I think that sort of stuff really starts to, it starts to build and it starts to grow in his head. I'm worried about Draymond Green, of all the people. Just buy in mentally, physically, just like overall, I am worried about him as a player on this team. If he can put it together and play the same way that he did last year, I think they're one of the best defensive teams in the league, if not the best defensive team in the league.
So I love what you're saying about Draymond, but I have another question, regarding another player on this roster, and I think it's Klay Thompson. Klay saved their bacon many times in last year's playoffs, and I think now having an elite scorer, but next to him on the wing now with Kevin Durant, a lot of touches aren't going to go his way, and he may have to focus more as a defender like he did in his first couple of seasons in the NBA. Do you see that being a problem for him at all? Because, again, I think he's a guy who's definitely grown into his role and could be a number one scorer on another roster, but now he's got to take almost a step and a half back with the addition of Durant.
I don't think so. I think Klay Thompson's pretty mature. I think he understands the game very well. He conducts himself very well off and on the court, I think, for the most part. So I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue for him. Yes, it's going to be reality check. I mean, for all these guys, they're excellent players. They've been known to get the ball every time they go down the court. And now, Kevin Durant's not going to get the ball every single time he goes down the court. Steph isn't going to. Clay isn't going to. I mean, really, it's going to be kind of a communal sharing of the ball, if you may. And I think that a lot of it is going to come down to Steve Kerr's coaching job and how he kind of fits these guys in. I almost see Klay Thompson being a very good role player on the bench, or not on the bench, but he'll start, but he'll go into the second rotation as that kind of primary ball handler to get him the touches potentially. And you could see that with Kevin Durant as well. I think they may rotate that in and out, so they're getting their share, if you may. So I think that they're going to be totally fine. I'm not worried about that. Like I said, the main worry for me is Draymond Green, but I definitely understand the concern of Klay Thompson not getting as many touches when he's got another guy like Kevin Durant on the wing. But if Kevin Durant's making shot after shot and they're winning game after game, I don't think this team is going to be complaining one bit or even worried about what the situation is, about who's getting the ball, when it's happening, how it's happening.
One of the interesting things, Oliver, that I see with this team, and a lot of people will focus their attention on that depth that they've had, the Andre Iguodala's, the Leandro Barbosas, now this roster is going to look very different. And it's interesting because for the last couple of years, we've been talking about how Lacombe and these guys have been a great assessor of talent. And now we see that with the emergence of Draymond Green and Steph Curry doing what he does and Klay Thompson and those guys. I'm looking at this batch over the last couple of seasons in their drafting pool. James Michael McAdoo, Kevin Looney, who was a first-round draft pick last season, the emergence of Ian Clark. Guys like, and now they drafted Patrick McCaw out of UNLV and Damian Jones from Vanderbilt. I'm just wondering, will any of these guys step up and add to this depth where we're talking about this Warriors team in the same amazement and awe when they put that roster together that they've had over the last 2 years, where their bench has come in and has really made those type of plays that has allowed the Warriors to be a holistically dangerous team? Are any of these young guys, in your opinion, ready to do that you're looking at right now?
Yeah, I think Clark has a chance to actually get a very good rotational set, or a set of minutes, I guess you could call it. I think his versatility on offense and defense, his ability to shoot the three, he can be a weapon. And I think he's shown it in the playoffs last season when Steph was out and a couple other players were out. He looked pretty good offensively. Defensively, he's not a Klay Thompson, but he's getting there. And I think that's going to be the guy that you may look to as a key for this Warriors team, kind of off the bench rotationally. I don't know if McCaw or Jones really fits in just yet. I don't know if he's going to. I don't know if either of those guys are going to get a ton of minutes rotationally. But McCaw definitely provides an upside that I like about him, and I think that maybe next year or potentially even 2 years down the road, he could be that Ian Clark kind of role player.
All right, Oliver. So we've talked about all 5 teams in this specific division. So it is prediction time. I mean, we've kind of alluded to a little bit here, as we've gone through each team. But give us your predictions, how they finish 1 through 5, and then also, which teams out of this division will make the playoffs.
I think the 2 teams that will make the playoffs will be obviously the Golden State Warriors and the LA Clippers. Both those teams will finish 1 and 2. I think Golden State is securely the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, just in my opinion. Probably overall in the NBA wins-wise, and then the Clippers will be behind them probably quite a bit. I would assume probably 10 to 15 games, depending on where Golden State's at in their season. Behind that, I think, I've been leaning both ways. I'm going to kind of take a shot and say that the Phoenix Suns finish 3rd and that the Sacramento Kings finish 4th. Rounding out that bottom, it'll be the Lakers, I think. The Lakers just aren't there yet overall.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that assessment. I think I have pretty much in the exact same order. I just think 3, 4, and 5 might be a little closer. Yep. Maybe separated by 4 or 5 games total, whatever like that, somewhere definitely in that 33 to 28 win mark, something like that. But I have it the exact same way. Golden State, definitely best team in the NBA, winning that conference, kind of going away. Clippers number 2, and I do like the Phoenix Suns as my 3rd pick. I think we both are believers here in Mr. Devin Booker and what he's going to be able to do with a full allotment of minutes on that roster for an entire NBA season. And then Sacramento, same thing. They just haven't really taking a step back or forward. So it really kind of is the same thing. And we all agree the Lakers are going to be a little bit better than they were last year. We should put them in that range where Phoenix and Sacramento are currently. CL?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the Golden State Warriors are going to be the head of the class in the Pacific Division. Number one, the Los Angeles Clippers, no question, will come in second. There's just too much talent, and really the team is deep enough that should they sustain any kind of injury from their big three, that they'll be able to maintain. There's a lot of versatility there. Whether or not it's good enough to best a team like the Golden State Warriors, I think will be remain to seen. These guys will have to step up. But I think the biggest question comes down to the third, fourth, and fifth position. I can't imagine that Luke Walton has enough pieces around him to get this team to play better than maybe a team like the Phoenix Suns or the Sacramento Kings. They don't have a Boogie Cousins, and they don't have a Brandon Knight or Bledsoe or even the emergence of a Devin Booker. I think when you have pieces like that alone, you should be better than more than 20 wins in a season, even in the Western Conference and even in the Pacific Division. So with that being said, the Lakers will definitely, be sucking up the bottom, unfortunately, but you will see vast improvement from that team. To your point, Oliver, I probably see them maybe garnering 3 to 5 more wins than they did in this previous season. With the Sacramento Kings and the Phoenix Suns, it's tough because the problem that I have with the Phoenix Suns is their health issues in the backcourt and the fact that most of the guys that they have filling those roles still have not shown an upside in development. Whereas with the Sacramento Kings, there's a little bit more veteran play surrounding Boogie Cousins that they could probably hold their own and win a couple of basketball games and play harder for Dave Yeager than I might see from Earl Watson. So the gap between those two might be 1 and 2. I probably still see the Sacramento Kings falling into that third spot with the Phoenix Suns, but it's only predicated that Bledsoe and Brandon Knight go through some form of injury, which I'm predicting is going to happen because they have yet to show me they can play a full season. But it's very close. I think it's a 2 to 3 win disparity between those two teams, because I think when you erase all of that, talent-wise, the Phoenix Suns can run with the Sacramento Kings and even be competitive to teams like the Los Angeles Clippers and the Golden State Warriors every now and again. So that is going to be my assessment and order. But nonetheless, the Pacific Division is chock full of some great talented players that we're going to love watching West Coast time wherever we're located when it comes to this upcoming NBA season. Oliver, we really appreciate you jumping on board with us to help us break down this intriguing division, and we're definitely looking forward to seeing you do many write-ups as you continue to do great work for Basketball Insiders, man.
I appreciate it, guys. I really do, and thank you very much for the time.
What a way for us to kick off the 2016 NBA season by giving you, the listeners, and our fellow listeners of the Baseline NBA podcast, a Pacific Division preview of not only just what was the best team last season in the NBA, but a team that obviously is going to be on the up and coming. The upside is going to be the youth movement out there in LA. And what better way to do that than have our man Oliver Maroney, Shaw. Great preview breakdown of 5 really intriguing teams where 2 or 3 of those teams are definitely on a different path and another one is on a war path, bro.
Absolutely. I think this is, like you said, an intriguing division. It's obviously very top heavy. And the other 3 teams in the division, they're going to be fighting for their spots within that division and be very kind of evenly matched. I know a lot of people are down on the Lakers. Some people are a little bit higher than they need to be. No one thinks the Lakers are going to be a playoff team or anything like that. But we are expecting some vast improvement from that organization and that team overall. I think we look at this division as a whole. You're looking at some, exciting players. Obviously, we know what to expect from the Clippers and Golden State. When you talk about guys like D'Angelo Russell, you talk about guys like Devin Booker, even Eric Bledsoe. You're wanting to see, can these guys be in the running for any type of NBA awards, if you will? I think with Russell, Oliver said he could see him being a most improved type of player, in his second season. That'd be amazing. Devin Booker, I think, could have the same argument, if you will, and Devin Booker might garner some All-Star consideration if he is really as good as some people think he could potentially be. I think this division has a lot of talent. Obviously, Boogie Cousins out there as well too. Again, fan favorite of the show. Lots we discussed on this week's show regarding this division, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out when the season actually comes around in October.
cornerstone players, man. I mean, if you really think about that, Shaw, cornerstone players, we've never identified that completely with the Golden State Warriors. And again, they've reverted back to what's made them a successful basketball team is playing as a team. They've got stars, but they all don't necessarily have to be superstars. They're stars kind of like in their own right, kind of like how it is. They're an independent team out in the Bay Area, like, you know, the E40s and the, you know what I'm saying, the Too Shorts of the world. They don't necessarily have to be glamorized holistically by the whole NBA community. They just do their thing out there. But then when you've got teams like the Los Angeles Lakers and the Los Angeles Clippers, you need an identifier. And I think the big question is who's going to be that cornerstone player for these franchise? Who's going to step up and take their team to that next level? If a guy like D'Angelo Russell is that guy, is he that fit for the Los Angeles Lakers organization? And then on the flip side, look at Boogie Cousins. He is a cornerstone player who's playing on a franchise that doesn't treat him like a cornerstone player. So, I mean, it's a really interesting dynamic when you see how this division is constructed and the way that they value the talent that they have. And if you're the Phoenix Suns, especially too, when you look at their roster, who wants to be that cornerstone player? It looks like guys that are on the precipice, but no one really ready to take the mantle just yet. So this division is going to play out very nicely. There's definitely going to be some offensive firepower when you look at all five of these basketball teams. But at the end of the day, I think about cornerstone players and who's going to be identified with each and every single one of these teams in the Pacific Division.
Yeah, man. Again, it's fun. And even think about outside of those cornerstone pieces, you know, people looking for redemption, as we like to say on our show, Hoops Redemption. Can Ty Lawson on the Kings and Aaron Aflalo? Can Ben McLemore on the Kings get his career finally on track? You know what I mean, that's a question that I think we want to see answered. Can Brandon
Alex Len out in Phoenix, right? We saw glimpses of him, you know, finally stepping up and being that first round draft pick out of Maryland. But is it enough now? Is the sample size enough to believe in that on a consistent basis?
Right. You know, and you said it. Can Bledsoe and Knight stay healthy out there, you know, in Phoenix, in the land of the desert? Is Brandon Ingram going to be a guy that we really should be considering, although highly touted as a rookie coming into the season? Will he be somebody who really develops in this first year, or will he take a couple years to grow, as Oliver potentially alluded to? Jordan Clarkson, is he another guy who could take a step up? So, I mean, there's a lot to be discussed. I mean, a lot we discussed, I keep saying, and I cannot wait for the NBA season to come around. But this specific division has a lot of intriguing storylines that, you know, that should play out, and I hope it all plays out for the positive for some of the guys that we've discussed on this.
Yeah, people are going to get enamored with the amount of wins when you're talking about the Golden State Warriors, but I really think that you should look at the amount of talent and where that talent lies at the beginning and ultimately at the end of the season, because I think a lot of where those answers are going to fall into place will not be through the numbers, so to speak, as it will be through the play and what you're seeing as these teams continue to emerge. What will they become? Ultimately, I think is going to be the biggest question. And so the Pacific Division is definitely the outlier for us to be able to look at and kind of gauge on the scope of how this Western Conference may ultimately play out when you've got teams like the Warriors and the Clippers vying to be one of the top dogs, not just in their division, but also in the conference. What a way to start off our preview. I'd like to thank Oliver Maroney from Basketball Insiders once again. Be sure to check him out at Maroney NBA. For the Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys, and we'll catch up with you next time.